But after the Panic of 1837, the Rothschilds in London decided the United States was growing so rapidly and getting so rich, and one of the reasons was we had great health care in this country. We had homeopathy and naturopathy, and the people were just so darn healthy they could work 18 hours a day, and nothing was ever wrong with them. This went on until 1913, when John D. Rockefeller decided to take over the medical profession and switch us from homeopathy to German allopathic medicine, which used a lot of drugs and radical surgery, and also was very profitable. So, since then, Americans have been getting sicker and sicker and sicker because we got away from that natural life that is so good for American people. And now we're taking all these expensive drugs, and they now even publish the side effects. They advertise on television. This drug will damage your liver, it'll damage your kidneys, it'll damage your heart, and people take them anyway because the medical profession tells you the benefits will outweigh the risks. I mean, you may have a medical problem, but a damaged liver and a damaged kidneys, that's not going to bother you. Don't worry about it. So that's the logic behind the medical profession today. And the reason I mention that is because the man behind the Federal Reserve System was John D. Rockefeller, same man who was behind the takeover of the medical profession. What I found out after many years was no matter what monopoly I went into, I was dealing with the same small cast of characters. So my work got easier and easier. I just rewrote the same thing about everybody I was writing about, whether they were in the oil monopoly, the medical profession, legal monopoly, politics. It was all the same crowd of people because this was a closed shop. They always kept everybody out except their old small elite crowd. And that's the way they operated. I was a child of the Great Depression. And I remember those dark days in the early 30s when my father was out of work, had 6 children to feed, had no idea how to feed them. And this brings us to a very important point. Now, you've heard a lot here about longevity and vitamins and health. But let me tell you, the Federal Reserve System is the greatest threat to your health and security that you will ever have in your life. Because there were many, many, many nervous breakdowns and suicides and deaths caused during the Depression by people who simply could not carry on. They were just crushed by this terrible thing that had happened to them. They were good workers, and suddenly they had no jobs, they had no way of feeding their families, and this is the most crushing thing that can happen to you. So I never thought at that time that I'd spend the rest of my life finding out who these criminals were who put over the Great Depression. But Congressman Charles Lindbergh warned the Congress and the American people during the great debate on the Federal Reserve System in 1913. He said, this is the money trust, and if you enact this bill, your children will be enslaved and they will curse you. Well, he was exactly right, because in the Depression, the children had no food, and their parents were out of work. But it was a great thing for the money crowd. They, of course, had sold all their stocks in 1929, just before the crash. Now, they took the cash and bought everything up for a penny on the dollar, just like they did in 1837 in the first panic we had in this country. It was the Rothschild representatives in the United States who went in and bought up the railroad stocks and the factory stocks for pennies because they had the only cash in town. And they just take over everything. But the Federal Reserve System itself is probably the most satanic institution in the United States. And it is the greatest moral threat, the greatest threat to your health, because everything that they do directly affects your daily life. Makes it more difficult, makes it more expensive, and it does have a terrible, burdensome effect on you, which affects you even though you don't know it.